On a cold morning over Western Europe in early 1944, German fighter pilots climbing into the sky saw an American aircraft they had learned to mock. It was big, it was heavy, it was ugly, and to many Luftwaffe veterans it looked slow and clumsy, like a flying bathtub. They called it useless. They believed it would be easy prey. But within weeks that same aircraft would tear through the skies of France and Germany, leaving burning wrecks behind it. 39 enemy fighters would be destroyed in just 1 month. And suddenly, no one was laughing anymore. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below. The aircraft was the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. And this is the story of how one of the most misunderstood fighters of World War II became one of the deadliest machines in the air, and how German pilots learned the hard way that underestimating it could cost them their lives. To understand why German pilots laughed at the P-47, we need to go back to its first appearance over Europe. The Thunderbolt arrived in the United Kingdom in the spring of 1943. At first glance, it did not look like a classic fighter. It was massive, with a huge radial engine in its nose, thick wings, and a tall, bulky body. Fully loaded, it weighed more than 8 tons. Compared to the slim German Messerschmitt Bf 109 or the sleek Focke-Wulf FW190, the P-47 looked oversized and awkward. Luftwaffe pilots were proud of their aircraft. Many of them were veterans of Spain, Poland, France, and the early years of the war against the Soviet Union. They trusted speed, climb rate, and tight turning ability. When they saw the Thunderbolt, they assumed it lacked all three. German intelligence reports from late 1942 and early 1943 suggested that the P-47 was heavy, slow to climb, and poor in low-altitude combat. German pilots began calling it the Jug, not knowing that American pilots had already adopted the nickname with pride. The first combat mission seemed to confirm German beliefs. Early P-47 units struggled with range, engine, management, and unfamiliar European weather. Some pilots pushed the engine too hard and lost power at altitude. Others found themselves outclimbed by Bf 109Gs. German pilots reported that the Thunderbolt could not turn with them and could be forced into defensive dives. Confidence grew inside the Luftwaffe, but the Thunderbolt had been designed for a different kind of war. It was not meant to turn tightly at low speed. It was built to fight at high altitude, to dive fast, and to absorb punishment that would tear other fighters apart. And once American pilots learned how to use it properly, the balance began to shift. The heart of the P-47 was its Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine. With 2,000 horsepower and a massive turbo supercharger system mounted in the rear fuselage, the aircraft could maintain power at extreme altitudes. At 30,000 feet, where many German fighters struggled, the Thunderbolt was still strong. In a dive, it was one of the fastest aircraft in the sky. German pilots who tried to follow it downward often found their controls locking up or their wings shaking dangerously. By late 1943, the United States Army Air Forces had refined their tactics. P-47 pilots were trained to fight using energy. They would attack from above, strike hard, and then dive away before the enemy could react. They avoided turning fights and focused on speed, firepower, and teamwork. And the Thunderbolt's firepower was terrifying. 850 caliber Browning machine guns, each capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute, could shred an enemy fighter in seconds. One of the units that would make the P-47 famous was the 56th Fighter Group, based at RAF Boxted in Essex, England. Commanded by Colonel Hubert Hub Zemke, the group became known as Zemke's Wolf Pack. Zemke was a skilled tactician and a firm believer in aggressive, disciplined combat. He taught his pilots to trust the Thunderbolt and to fight on their own terms. By January 1944, the 56th Fighter Group was flying deep escort missions over Germany, protecting American B-17 and B-24 bombers. These missions were dangerous. German fighters attacked in waves, often head-on, using rockets and cannons to break up bomber formations. It was during these brutal battles that the P-47 proved its worth. On January 11, 1944, during a massive raid against aircraft factories around Oschersleben and Halberstadt, P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group encountered large numbers of German fighters. The sky was filled with contrails and explosions. In the chaos, Thunderbolt pilots dove from high altitude, firing long bursts into enemy formations. Several Bf-109s and FW-190s were destroyed. German pilots reported being shocked by how fast the P-47 could dive and how much damage it could take. But the month that truly changed everything was March 1944. By this time, Allied preparations for the invasion of Normandy were in full swing. Air superiority was critical. The Luftwaffe was under pressure like never before. Fuel shortages, inexperienced pilots, and constant Allied bombing were taking their toll. Still, German fighters continued to rise to meet the bombers. During March, one particular P-47 unit achieved something that stunned both sides. In a single month, they destroyed 39 German fighters. These victories were not accidents. They were the result of training, discipline, and a deep understanding of the aircraft's strengths. One of the pilots involved was Major Francis "Gabby" Gabreski, the highest-scoring American ace in the European theatre. Flying a P-47D, Gabreski used altitude and speed to his advantage. He attacked swiftly, fired accurately, and disengaged before the enemy could respond. German pilots later recalled encounters with Thunderbolts that seemed impossible to catch or shake. On March 8, 1944, Gabreski scored multiple victories during an escort mission near Berlin. Diving from above, he caught German fighters as they climbed toward the bombers. His .50 caliber guns tore through their wings and fuselages. Several enemy aircraft went down in flames. That same day, other P-47 pilots added to the tally. The Luftwaffe was losing aircraft faster than it could replace them. German reaction was swift but desperate. Fighter units were ordered to develop new tactics against the Thunderbolt. Pilots were told to avoid diving pursuits and to attack from above whenever possible. But this was easier said than done. The Thunderbolt's turbo supercharger allowed it to operate effectively at altitudes where German fighters were already at the edge of their performance. Reports from Jagdgeschwader units in March 1944 began to change in tone. Where earlier reports had dismissed the P-47 as inferior, newer ones described it as dangerous, heavily armed, and difficult to destroy. Some German pilots noted that even when they hit a Thunderbolt, it often continued flying. Its rugged construction, self-sealing fuel tanks, and armor plating saved many American pilots' lives. One famous example occurred on March 20, 1944. A P-47 returned to base with parts of its tail missing, holes in its wings, and damage to the engine. Any lighter aircraft would have been lost. The pilot survived and flew again days later. Stories like this spread quickly among both Allied and Axis pilots. The Thunderbolt's success was not limited to air-to-air combat. As the war moved closer to D-Day, P-47s were increasingly used for ground attack. They carried bombs and rockets, striking rail yards, bridges, tanks, and troop columns. German soldiers on the ground came to fear the distinctive sound of the P-47's engine and gunfire. The aircraft earned another nickname, the Juggernaut. By April and May 1944, the Luftwaffe was in crisis. Pilot training programs were shortened. Fuel was rationed. Experienced pilots were lost faster than they could be replaced. Against this backdrop, the Thunderbolt continued to dominate large areas of the sky. The idea that it was useless had vanished completely. German pilots who survived the war later admitted their mistake. In post-war interviews, some said they had underestimated American engineering and American adaptability. The P-47 was not perfect. It was heavy, and it required careful handling. But in the hands of trained pilots, it was deadly. By the end of World War II, more than 15,000 P-47s had been built. They flew in Europe, the Mediterranean and the Pacific. They destroyed thousands of enemy aircraft and countless ground targets. The Thunderbolt became one of the most successful fighters of the war. The month when 39 German fighters were destroyed by P-47s marked a turning point. It was the moment when mockery turned into respect and then into fear. The Thunderbolt had proven itself beyond doubt. Today, when historians look back at the air war over Europe, the P-47 stands as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. What looked slow and clumsy was, in reality, powerful, fast, and incredibly tough. German pilots laughed at it once. They never laughed again. And high above the fields and cities of Europe, in the thin air where life and death were decided in seconds, the P-47 Thunderbolt earned its place as one of the great fighters of World War II, not through reputation, but through results written in smoke and fire across the sky. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.